I've spent 10 years cold calling across Oracle, Google Cloud, and a late-stage startup, and in this video I'm going to share with you a real-world cold call script I put together for one of our clients that's helping him consistently crush his quota. This script draws from the data, from studies done by companies like Gong that have analyzed billions of cold calls, and it draws from top industry thought leaders and leaders like CRO Kevin Dorsey and Outbound Squad CEO Jason Bay, who I've both had on the podcast, and we've even done role plays. I'll break down the approach to this script, exactly why it works, and how you can use it in your own script to print meetings and get more results. Let's get straight into it. If you want to make this script as effective as possible, you need to start with a fundamental understanding of your market and your company's solution and how it impacts clients in the market. First off, you need to know the right targets. What does your ICP or ideal client profile look like? What are the specific characteristics in terms of industry and company size and maybe some other factors that define your best looking customers? And who are the ideal personas or the people at those customers who actually impact the buying decision when it comes to your solution? You also want to understand the compelling events or changing dynamics in your prospect's world that introduces a need for your solution and introduces a more compelling reason for you to be talking. And finally, you need to understand the core differentiators of your solution versus other alternatives in the market. When it comes to solving the core problems that your solution solves, why do your customers choose you over your competitors? Once you clearly understand your ideal client profile and what they look like, your ideal personas and what they look like, your core solution and the core problems that it solves, the compelling events and triggers that introduce a need for your solution, and your core differentiators, you want to weave all of these things into your cold call script to create a script that really resonates, builds trust, and prints meetings. In this specific script example, you'll notice that one of my client's ideal client profiles is home services companies. One of his ideal personas is marketing directors. His core solution is an AI omni-channel marketing software that solves the core problems of preventing missed opportunities to convert warm leads, and ultimately, the solution helps drive top-line revenue for marketing departments and companies. Compelling events for the solution that my client solves all align to increasing marketing efforts, growing marketing campaigns, and specific signals like increased website traffic and SEO traffic are a good indication and great compelling events that my client can reference in his cold call script. And my client's solution has multiple differentiators versus alternatives in the market, one of them being their approach to multi-channel or phone, email, and text to follow up with leads. You'll see all of these ingredients woven into the 4-part script I'm about to walk you through. And the 4 parts include the opener, which earns the opportunity to get a minute of the prospect's undivided attention to share why you're calling. After the opener, the second part of the script is where we pique the prospect's curiosity. We position ourselves as a trusted advisor, framing relevant problems that their peers in the industry are facing. The third part of the script is asking great discovery questions, which ultimately help us understand their current situation, their pain points, their goals, and provide us with the hook that we'll use to ultimately execute step number 4, which is confidently asking for and setting the meeting. Now hold up a second. One more thing I gotta tell you before we walk through this exact script example is that the energy and intention behind your words is so much more important when it comes to connecting with prospects and setting meetings. You could have the perfectly worded script, but if you're anxious and if you're coming from the wrong place from an intentions perspective, you're going to fall flat on your face. You want to show up as confident, calm, and composed, highly curious, and coming from a place of service. You want to know, how can I help this prospect? And you know that if you do have the ability to help a prospect, you have an obligation to reach out to them. So you're also coming from a place of conviction that you know you can serve companies like them, and you'd love to know if you can also help them out. You're also unattached to the outcome. You're not trying to force a meeting at all costs, but authentically explore if there's a real fit to have a further conversation and explore working together. You're speaking from your chest voice. Your voice is coming from your diaphragm. Your breath is coming from your mouth rather than your nose. You're not talking in a high-pitched, nasally voice. Hi, how are you? It's going to cause red flags to go up in the mind of the prospect, but you're speaking from that chest voice, and you're slow and measured. You're not talking too fast and frantically, because that also raises red flags in the mind of the prospect as well. Ultimately, you deliver with confidence, with fluidity, coming from the right place, and that all hinges on you practicing this script. So after I review this script step by step, your homework is to practice so that when it's game time, you're not caught practicing on the court and you can actually rock the conversation. All right, it's time. Let's get into it. It's time to walk through exactly what to say in part 1 of the script, the opener. Imagine the prospect picks up. Hello? Hey Tim, this is Chris calling from Apton. I was just on your website and I noticed your traffic's growing over 200%, and I was hoping I could ask you a couple quick questions to see if it's even worth a larger conversation. Would that be okay? You got a second? End scene. Let's break down what's going on right there. First off, you're starting with a formality. Hey, prospect name, because every prospect, every person loves the sound of their own name. This is Chris calling from Apton. You need to say your name and who you're calling from. That's table stakes. And then the next part of the opener, this is what we call the justifier. You're sharing a reason for reaching out that piques curiosity. You're showing that you're approaching the conversation with some intentionality. You were on their website. You noticed a compelling event or a trigger that might introduce a need for your solution. Their website traffic was over 200%. They're growing. Then the specific language I was hoping has a very positive effect. It's positive language, and from a psychology perspective, it creates a nice tone for the rest of the conversation to flow. And then when you say to see if it's even worth a larger conversation, you're reducing sales pressure. You're showing you're not the one-track minded seller who's a robot just trying to force a meeting at all costs. You imply you're open to the possibility there might not be a fit and you're willing to walk away. And then when you say, would that be okay? Do you have a second? You're asking for permission. You're allowing the prospect to choose to opt into the conversation or not. You keep them in control, and that really puts them at ease and makes them feel good. So now it's time to enter into phase 2 of this cold call script, piquing curiosity. So the prospect says, go ahead, you got a minute. Thank you. We talk to marketing directors at home services companies like yourself all the time, and they're typically telling us they're struggling with inbound leads slipping through the cracks, costing them thousands of dollars in missed pipeline and revenue opportunities. I'm curious, what are you currently doing today? What's your approach to preventing misleads and ultimately maximizing your revenue? So what's going on here? First off, we're positioning ourselves as a trusted advisor that gets the prospect to think, okay, Chris talks to people like me in my specific industry, and he gets my world. He actually gets the challenges my peers are facing, and he might have some relevant insights to offer. You're building trust by framing relevant problems that may or may not be a current priority for them to solve. And then you're rounding out this piquing curiosity portion of the cold call by asking an open-ended, neutral question that opens up a stream of conscious dialogue from the prospect side, where you just simply want to get them talking and sharing. Because only when they start talking with you and you start having an actual meaningful conversation can you actually find a reason for a meeting and have that hook and that justification to have a follow-up conversation. Now, real quick, I have to double click on the power of open-ended neutral questions. When you ask something like, how are you managing this specific process? Or what is your current approach to preventing missed inbound lead opportunities and maximizing revenue? That opens up a conversation as opposed to a closed question, which often leads prospects to shut you down. An example of a closed version of the open-ended question I just asked would be this. Do you feel like you're missing out on any inbound lead opportunities? That's a question that it's easy for the prospect to say yes or no to, and then you're in a tough position. You don't have an open dialogue, and you kind of have to work a little bit harder to open things up from there. Also notice this is a leading question. It's a manipulative question where it feels like you're trying to get the prospect to say what you want them to say. Of course, you want them to say, yeah, I feel like we're missing out on inbound lead conversion opportunities, but they're going to resist that. They feel like that question is manipulative. So ask open-ended, neutral questions that get the prospect talking about their current processes and approaches and current state. And that leads me to part 3 of the cold call, which is asking great, thoughtful discovery questions. You're going to want to ask 4 types of discovery questions: current state questions, tell me more questions, pain-seeking questions, and art of the possible questions. Let's walk through examples of each. The question that we just asked at the end of the piquing curiosity portion of the cold call script is an example of a current state question. And it's going to be helpful to design current state questions that's going to lead the prospect down a path to brush up against pain points that you solve in a differentiated way. So you want to do some homework on your solution-specific differentiators and the business processes that those differentiators impact, and then ask open-ended neutral questions about how your prospect is approaching the processes that your differentiators address and impact in a unique way. I worked with my client to map out some specific open-ended questions that align to processes that were impacted by his differentiators, and one of their specific differentiators was their multi-channel follow-up capabilities across the phone, email, and text. So here's one of the questions that we came up with that would guide the prospect of his to brush up against a pain point and a gap that his solution addresses in a unique way. If a prospect responds via email, text, or a phone call and says follow up in a few weeks, how do you specifically handle that conversation and follow up? That open-ended neutral question is going to get the prospect talking about how they approach things, and then there's going to be an opportunity to dig in a little deeper to see if they have gaps that my client can actually address and fill, and then to get into the cost and impact of those gaps and use that as the hook for the meeting. Another differentiator of my client's solution is around real-time notifications. But instead of telling the prospect, oh, we're great with real-time notifications, what are you doing for real-time notifications? Do you have that capability? You're going to ask an open-ended question like this. What's your current approach to proactively identifying action items and gaps to bring a human in the loop? My client's solution also has a differentiator around NLP tagging and category analytics, whatever that means. But instead of talking about buzzwords and features and benefits, you'll ask an open-ended neutral question around the process that capability actually impacts. That question might look like this. How do you currently organize leads and conversations? Simple, open-ended, and that brings me to the second type of discovery question you want to ask your prospects to keep the conversation flowing after you ask current state questions. Those are tell me more questions, and here's a couple examples. Oh, interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Pause, zip the lip, and let them keep going. Another example. Oh, interesting. How's that working out for you? Or, interesting. Why did you choose to approach things that way? A rookie mistake many sellers make when it comes to discovery on a cold call or a formal discovery call is stopping short in their line of questioning and pivoting with their questions to different topics way too quickly. You want to ask more, get them talking more, and go deeper. Speaking of going deeper, that brings me to the third type of discovery question you want to ask, which is pain-seeking questions. If you don't have a pain that you're solving that impacts the organization and impacts a prospect even at a personal level, you have no reason to continue a conversation, you have no reason to set a future meeting, and you really have no deal. Customers move away from pain. That's the ultimate psychological motivator. So imagine you asked your open-ended neutral questions around how prospects are approaching processes that you can impact in a differentiated way, and you get them talking more. Now it's time to ask them questions like this to really qualify the cost of inaction. How much do you think the inability to flag situations where you need to bring a human into the loop is costing you in terms of missed pipeline conversion opportunities? That second one actually sounded like a little bit of a mouth. Essentially what you're doing is you're asking, how much do you think X gap or pain point is costing you in terms of whatever the outcome is, whether it's leaving dollars on the table in terms of revenue or specific risk and liability, or maybe operational expense. You're getting into the cost of inaction, and in sales, the cost of inaction has to be greater than the cost of change to drive a conversation and deal forward. Other great painstaking questions you can follow up with is what happens if you don't figure this out? How would that impact you personally? And one final thought as you qualify the pain and the cost of inaction is asking the prospect, how long has this been an issue? What have you done to try and solve the problem in the past? If the prospect has allowed the issue to persist for a long time, maybe they're not really committed to solving the issue. And by understanding what they've tried to do in the past to solve the problem, it's going to better inform your proposed future solution, and it's also going to indicate if they're actually serious about solving the problem. Now, the fourth and final type of question I want to encourage you to ask in your discovery to help you solidify your hook for the meeting is an art of the possible question that gets the prospect dreaming about a future state and a better life with you and your solution in place. An example of an art of the possible question would look something like this. What would it mean for you and your team if you could increase lead conversion month over month by 10% and revenue by thousands of dollars a month using an AI personalized agent that scales your ability to handle conversations across phone, email, and text? You've asked current state questions to understand specific gaps in their processes and approaches. You've got them talking more to dig into exactly what they're doing. You've magnified the cost of inaction and the cost of that gap. And now you've got them thinking about a better way, the art of the possible, with you, filling that gap and helping them achieve better outcomes. Now it's time to close. It's time to confidently ask for and set the meeting. And that's part 4 of the script. Let's rock, let's do it, let's seal the deal. You've got your hook for the meeting, and this is how you ask for it. Tim, it sounds like improving your pipeline conversion rates, specifically by better managing the way you engage with leads across channels and follow up. It sounds like that's a priority that would make a meaningful impact for your business. And the good news is I'm glad I called because we help companies like yours in the home services space, like XYZ Company, drive incremental revenue by thousands of dollars a month by better engaging across different channels. So I'm glad I called. Do you mind if I make a quick suggestion? Awesome, thanks. How about we set aside some dedicated time when I'm not calling you out of the blue to connect with your account executive who talks with a ton of other home services companies like yourself to share some stories of how we're helping other companies and some industry insights that are going to be useful to your business. At minimum, even if you don't move forward after this conversation, you're going to come away with useful business ideas and an open line of communication to our company and our resources as your insurance policy in this area for the future. Awesome. Let's set it up. How does next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Central work for you? Okay, great. I'm sending over the calendar invite now. Can you just let me know when you receive it and once you've accepted it? Okay, perfect. By the way, is there anyone else who you think should join the conversation? Okay, perfect. If you could forward this invite along to Tammy as well, that would be great. Tim, I really appreciate the time to connect next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Central to talk about how we can help you drive more pipeline and revenue. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you have a great rest of your week and weekend in the meantime. Cheers. End the scene. Notice the smile at the end? You gotta bring those positive vibes, baby. They can feel that smile, that positivity through the phone. Now let's quickly break down why I framed my ask that way and what's going on behind the words. First off, I was recapping what I heard to be a business problem and priority. To drive pipeline conversion and revenue, avoid missing out on leads, whatever you uncovered from the conversation, you want to recap that you heard that to be a priority worth solving, and you're glad you're reaching out because this is where you drop social proof, and then you say you're glad you reached out and emphasize your credibility and position yourself as a trusted advisor one more time with a little more social proof saying, you know, we help companies like you, maybe name drop, solve this exact issue. And then you ask if you can make a suggestion, asking for permission, keeping the prospect in control, and allowing them to opt in to the next part and the final phase of the conversation, which is your ask. And then when you ask for the meeting, you are appealing to reason, like how about we set aside some time when you're not being interrupted and called out of the blue to talk with your dedicated account executive who talks to customers like you all the time. You're basically selling the value of your account executive as a resource, being a trusted advisor that has relevant insights. And you're guaranteeing value at the end. You're saying at minimum, you're going to come away with ideas that are useful to your business, which any executive, any prospect wants. And you're going to get access to us and our resources as your insurance policy for the future. We're going to reduce your risk. We're going to increase your options. We're going to be an extra resource for you. And who doesn't want that? By guaranteeing value from the meeting to the prospect, regardless of if they move forward on next steps in the form of new ideas, options, access to resources, and reduce risk, you alleviate their greatest fear that you're going to waste their time, which unfortunately, past sellers who engage with them who are not good at their job, they weren't professionals, they actually wasted the prospect's time, and so you really need to proactively alleviate that fear. This is why at the end, I really make an effort to sell the value of the meeting. It's not going to waste their time. It's going to give them something to walk away with, regardless of if they move forward. And finally, I firmly set the meeting before getting off the phone. I asked for a specific day and time in the future. I didn't ask for the next day because most executives are really busy, their calendars fill up fast, and it's kind of unrealistic to try and get a meeting the next day or even the same day. So I asked for a specific time at a day in the future. And then I got the prospect to confirm that time, confirm they accepted the calendar invite, and even confirm if anyone else needed to join the conversation. In this case, it turned out there was another person at Tim's company who he wanted to join the conversation, and it's important to clarify that and maximize the audience for the next conversation, because otherwise, if you have the discovery call with your AE and there's key people who aren't a part of it that need to be, you're actually going to delay the sales cycle. Once the audience was confirmed, I re-emphasized the day and time of the meeting, the reason for the meeting, and that I looked forward to it, and wished them a great rest of their week, ending with a nice positive note. And speaking of endings, that's a wrap. That's what I got for you today. Make sure to steal these cold calling scripts and approaches and implement them to book more meetings, and share your successes in the comments, and also drop any of your questions in the comments that I might not have addressed, because cold calling is very nuanced. We talked about mindset and delivery, and your company and your solution and your customers and your differentiators and your compelling events are going to look different than those of the client whose specific script I reviewed today. So if you want a coach to help you master cold calling, A to Z, including objections, which we didn't even cover today, if you want a coach to help you get promoted from SDR to account executive, I'm your guy. And consider booking time at my link in the description of this video, where we can map out a strategy for you to hit your tech sales goals and maximize your success, your income, and your career trajectory. I've helped people like Alex, Nick, and Olivia crush it in big tech at companies like Splunk, Snowflake, health tech startups, and I'd love to help you out too. And if you're not ready for one-on-one coaching, I've got a free cold calling system linked in the description of this video as well that's going to walk you through several proven scripts, mindset, and 15 objection examples from the real world and proven responses that leverage psychology to help you really open up more conversations and set more meetings. All right, guys, to your success in tech sales and in life, happy selling and happy living, and we'll see you in the next one.